Oh, hey, Konami, you're still alive! Wonderful! You know, I just don't understand why Konami has become a pachinko machine maker and left the gaming world behind. It literally makes no sense to me whatsoever. Anyways, I digress. Today we're going to be taking a look at Castlevania Anniversary Collection. This one right here is for the Nintendo Switch, and it's actually the second anniversary collection after their arcade shooter one, and honestly for me, this is a no-brainer. Go buy it. If you love original action-based Castlevania games of yesterday, this collection is a must-have. It contains the original Castlevania, that is Castlevania 1 through Castlevania 4, Castlevania Bloodlines, Castlevania the Adventure, and Belmont's Revenge, and finally Kid Dracula. Some of these are absolute classics, while others might be somewhat bizarre additions. If you know absolutely nothing of Castlevania, the short version is this. You typically play as one of the Belmonts on a quest to kill Dracula, Lord of the Vampires, and the evil Prince of Darkness. Along the way, you'll find sub-weapons such as the Holy Cross, Axe, Knife, Holy Water, and Stopwatch to help bring down Dracula's evil minions. Each of these games has little tweaks and changes to spice things up, but overall, that's the crux of the action-based Castlevania games. Notice I keep saying that, action-based Castlevania games. Well, that's for good reason. The more non-linear games, a la Dracula X, Rondo of Blood, or the more recent Metroid-like games such as, well, basically every 2D Castlevania game released after Symphony of the Night, are nowhere to be found here. This set is almost entirely based on the early days of the franchise. The most non-linear experience you're going to get is with Castlevania 2 and 3, which are both NES games. The series started off strong with Castlevania on the NES with a tough-as-nails linear action game. The series would evolve into a rather unique action RPG hybrid of sorts with Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, which, much like Zelda 2, was unlike the original in almost every single way. This one hasn't aged quite as well as the original Castlevania, and even though the first entry was full of slowdown, it remains quite fun to play to this very day, and it also retains a lot of its charm. Castlevania 2, on the other hand, really requires a guide to play through properly, and some gameplay design choices leave a lot to be desired. I'm looking at you, Day-Night System. Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse is a prequel to the franchise and sees players taking on the role of Trevor Belmont and his three friends as they make their way through a non-linear gameplay world on their way to Dracula's lair. Castlevania 4, the first entry in the series on the Super Nintendo, is a Mode 7 feast, and features a fantastic 8-directional whip as well as some absolutely killer music. It's a sort of remake of the very first Castlevania game. The two Game Boy entries, Castlevania the Adventure and Belmont's Revenge, are both rather simplistic compared to the other games in the series, although Revenge plays about 1,000,000 times better than the Adventure does. This also begs the question why the Rebirth version of Adventure, which was released on the Wii, was not ported here, especially since that version is no longer available thanks to the closure of the WiiWare online store. Castlevania Bloodlines is the sole Genesis/Mega Drive entry in the collection, and it's well worth mention here, as it's one of the best games in this set. It is far gorier than the other games and features two awesome playable characters, and it's even loosely tied to Bram Stoker's novel. The last game in this collection is Kid Dracula, which was never released outside of Japan, and is some kind of like side series for Castlevania. It's an action game that's heavy on the cuteness and big on the classic Konami NES fun. This was actually a really welcome surprise to the collection, although I've got to be honest that I'm actually surprised for a completely different reason, and that is why Castlevania Legends, the last game released on the Game Boy, which is insanely hard to find today, nor Dracula X, Rondo of Blood, or even Symphony of the Night made the cut. That would have been utterly awesome if that was the case, and honestly, I'm really hoping that we get a second or even a third game in this collection. I, for one, would even love to revisit the 3D entries, and I would just love it if they would include a demo for the long-lost and forgotten Dreamcast entry, Castlevania Resurrection, which was cancelled close to its completion and featured Sonia Belmont from Castlevania Legend. Maybe one day, guys, maybe one day. In terms of bells and whistles, there's really not too much here. Each game has one save state, some background info on the game, a few screen filters, and well, that's about it. The emulation was handled by the excellent M2 that worked on a ton of the Sega Ages releases, and it's absolutely fantastic, the emulation. There's no option to play the Japanese versions of the games though, and there's no way to change the button layout. And Castlevania on the NES is based on the very original PRG 0 version of the game, which was known to crash. Thankfully, Konami has already confirmed that they're going to be patching the game with additional improvements, so hopefully a lot of these minor issues will be fixed by the time you watch this review. Castlevania remains one of my absolute favorite video game franchises of all time, and I would hope that we see another entry in the series before too long. I eventually want to have it so that every single Castlevania game ever released would be available for the masses to play. And for under $30, this digital offering of 8 games is well worth checking out. Most of the games on this list are absolutely sensational, and even the ones that aren't so hot are still well worth checking out, if only for their historical relevance. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go destroy Dracula in one of his many evil incarnations.